Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Adobe Live. I'm Elissa, and I'm a designer here at Adobe on Adobe Fresco, and I'm here with Anthony Jones, also known as Robot Pencil.
Hello, everybody. Hello again.
We got some really cool stuff we're going to do today. We're looking at character design. So Anthony is a concept artist, character designer. You've been in the industry around like 12 years-ish.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we did some really cool stuff yesterday, so we're going to get even deeper into some texture, some drawing in Photoshop, some character design. And get in the chat, everyone. Let us know where you're from. I see some people, Sarah, hey Kita, Viola, some people from yesterday. What's up, Sam, Anthony? Nice to see you all. In about 30 minutes, we're going to have a chat and win, so you should all get in the chat, ask us some questions, let us know what you want to talk about and see today if you have any questions for Anthony, and then we'll have 100 free 3x3 die-cut stickers that you can win from Sticker Mule, so look out for that. We also have a daily creative challenge going on, so if you look at the challenge tab in your chat window, you'll see that today's challenge is to create a one-of-a-kind graphic print using gradients and filters in Photoshop. And in about an hour and a half or so, we're going to go into Discord and look at all the stuff that you guys have created and give you some feedback. So we saw a lot of really cool stuff yesterday. So if you made some changes based on our feedback, make sure to put that in so we can take a look at it again. So what do you want to talk about today? What are we going to look at?
Okay, so for those of you who were here yesterday, I showed some character concept designs. I drew some robots today. I'm going to do something a little bit more organic, maybe something a little bit more fantasy and with more texture. But I also wanted to talk about more practical stuff. I think yesterday there was a lot of great questions, and I'm sure there's going to be great questions today too that I'm going to answer. But before I do, I want to kind of do like a 5 to 10 minute kind of demonstration of just like what allows me to have a really nice workflow. So for those of you who were watching yesterday, you can kind of you guys got a glimpse of like the speed and efficiency, but I'm going to kind of talk about how that's possible in a more like, this is my setup, this is how I set up, this is my philosophy about my setup and style that will hopefully inspire you to think about how to do your own workflow and process. It doesn't matter what the tool you're using, as long as you are like aware that there are ways to customize it, right? And almost all of the Adobe like products are like pretty effective when it comes to, minimizing the interface to your needs. And so for me, you guys might have saw yesterday, I was drawing with like little to no interface around. I did it because it's a really great way to showcase just the art. It removes kind of like the digital feel of what I'm doing too, and it really relies on me on focusing on just the painting. And so I like to have just the full screen because it feels like I said, more natural.
Like a focused state for you, right?
Yeah.
Removes the distractions.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about the interface between like a paper and pencil, like what's the interface? It's just
those
the paper.
Two things, right?
It's just the paper and pencil. And so when you have like all of these menus open and you just like all of these things that are just like floating around, it can get real distracting, And I know some people like that I work with, they'll have like everything and it's like their canvas is just like not even existent. It's just, they're more like being super technical. And I think that makes sense for certain aspects. I know whenever I'm dealing with Premiere, I actually prefer where like I want to see all of the interface because I'm dealing with a lot of files, I'm dealing with effects and all these great things. But for me, it's a matter of painting and designing, and so I don't want to have to think about the interface. And so a challenge that I have for people is try to draw without the interface, right? Just like, paint something, draw something, and see what you can come up with. And you'll immediately be like, oh, I need the eraser, or I need something like out of the tools panel. So then pull up the tools panel, like find what that tool is. So let's say the eraser, for instance, right? It's like right here. Click on it, and you can see what the default hotkeys are, and just memorize them.
Get used to doing that, right?
Yeah. So you say, oh, it's E. Okay, so E is for erase, B is for brush, E is for erase, B is for brush. if you visit like sites too, you can get like just a laundry list of all the hotkeys that are available. So if you're not sure of certain hotkeys, you can just go there too. But you also can just edit them, right? So if you go to keyboard shortcuts and go to like application menus, you can change all the hotkeys that are available on the top menus here. Or if you want to have like the tools, you can just go over here and find the appropriate tool and change the hotkey. Now you'll notice here, for instance, on the brush, there is like brush, the pencil, and the mixer brush. What you can do is you can also delete hotkeys. So for instance, I don't really use the pencil that often, so let me just get rid of it. And what this does is if we hit OK, if I hold Shift and B, now it's only switching between the brush and the brush mixer. Now if I would have kept it as default, it would have go brush, the pencil, then the brush mixer. Does that make sense? So it's like, I'm always gonna have to like skip that second option.
Cycle through.
Yeah. But if I only want to cycle between two, I just delete one of them, and then there you go. Certain other hotkeys can be changed to whatever you like. So for instance, in image, there's image rotation, there's flip canvas horizontal. So that's Control W for me.
I saw you doing that a lot yesterday.
Oh, yeah. One time I sped up like a 1 hour, 2 hour painting that I did to like a 1 minute video.
And it was like this the whole time.
It was like, it would give you a seizure if you were watching it. Yeah, absolutely. And so, maximizing your hotkeys in this way is a really effective tool, because then you're just kind of like, you're painting and then you're like, oh, I need like a thing. I need like to make a new layer. So even that, right? Like you may think, oh, you have to go here. You got to press this, There's actually a hotkey for making a new layer. And I believe it's like Control, I forget exactly what it was. I think it's Control Shift. Yeah, it's Control Shift N, but I've made mine Control Shift W, and I'll explain right now. So I zoomed in way too intense.
We got some people in the chat. Hey, Robzilla's here. Hey, and then we have a question. Are you strictly self-taught? Did you go to art school?
Oh, okay. So I'll get to that question actually right away. But before I do, I want to kind of finish the point I'm making here. But that's a great question, and I'll make sure to answer that first. So the reason why I changed my hotkey to Control Shift W is because a lot of the keys that I have my hand on is on the left side of the keyboard. So I have my Wacom tablet right here. I have my keyboard obviously right in front of me, but then I have my hand over here and my other hand over here. And so the end key is like on the other side of the keyboard, not too far, but it's far enough that if I keep doing it, I can see myself getting like carpal tunnel, It's like
too much doing this.
Yeah, I'm going to have a lot of this going on every time I'm doing hotkeys. Because here's the thing. If you do Control Shift Alt N, right, it will make a new layer without asking you to name it. Because if you do this, it's going to ask you to name it, which could be useful.
But it could get in the way as well, right?
Yeah, but what if I just want to like make a new layer,
yeah,
right, and not even worry about it? Check it out. I just made a new layer, right? And if I do it again, oops, hold on. Yeah, I think I did it again. Yeah, see, so there's another one here, right? Yeah. So I got 2 layers that I just made a hotkey for, or I made with only using hotkeys. So you see, I literally just made 3 layers, right? And that I can just manipulate right now. And you can probably already imagine how useful that is while you're designing or doing anything else. And you might have noticed that I know how to like fill the whole layer just with white. That's a hotkey in itself too. So there's like hotkeys for almost everything. And there's even hotkeys for something that you couldn't even imagine would be true. So let me like paint something real quick. So let's say I have like some sort of object, right? And I'm painting it, I'm painting it, I'm painting it. So it's on its own. Well, it's not on its own layer, it's like on the same layer, but that's fine. In fact, that's better for this demonstration. So I'm designing this creature or some sort of object or some sort of material that I want to do. And I like to use color dodge a lot, right? And color dodge gives you this effect whenever you paint on top of something. It kind of makes it like immediately specular. So you'll notice that I've made my brush color dodge. And you're like, wait, what? Yeah, no, it's color dodge. Now it's not. And it's like, now it is. Wait, now it is. Right? See how it's like overexposing it?
Oh, got it. Yeah.
Yeah. This is even better demonstrated if
Color dodge is a blend mode.
Yes.
Right?
So it's better demonstrated with even color. So check this out. So let me just get here, and then let me pick a color that I know is going to have a pretty... So if I just do this regular, that's what you would see, right? But if I do it with color dodge, it's going to give you this kind of
Oh, I see.
effect.
Yes.
And you guys might be thinking, wait, what? What's going on?
That's crazy.
And then I'm on overlay now, right? I'm on colored mode now, so I can change the color of this.
And you know which ones you're switching to because it's all hooked up to your hotkeys.
Because a brush could be set to a blend mode. And I accidentally stumbled upon this because I accidentally turned my brush mode into color dodge, and I didn't realize I did that. And then I realized, wait, I didn't manually go up here, change it to color dodge, which I would normally do. It just was color dodge. And I was like, oh wait, there's a hotkey for that? So I looked it up, and sure enough, there's a hotkey, and it's basically Shift Alt D gets you color dodge.
Okay.
And Shift Alt N brings you back to normal.
Oh, okay.
You know? And again, you can imagine, like, if you're just trying to paint, you're not worried about, like, keeping it organized and all these different layers. You're just trying to, like, make a really cool image really quickly. You can imagine, like, memorizing the blend modes on your brush. You could, like, create really cool effects.
Totally.
Which is without actually, you know,
going
opening
through
up
menus,
the menu. Yes.
Scrolling through.
Absolutely.
Looking around. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so it's like, there's a lot of things that I do to maximize this, right? I've took advantage of really great tools like the shape tool, so I can create, you know, shapes like this, right? And you can see how making shapes can immediately make an environment, you know, if I use this appropriately, right? Like I can get like, there's a house there now, you know? And I learned how to use the paths so I can make these shapes that I would use in here whenever I need to use them for whatever reason, especially if I'm just trying to speed paint an environment. This can be incredibly useful.
Yeah.
Photoshop just announced like the object selection, you know, which I'm still messing with. It's just a new feature, so I'm still kind of playing around with it, but it's already like really useful, you know, even with just me messing around with it. And so Photoshop is not necessarily a painting tool, you know. It's a photo manipulating software that has a lot of great tools to manipulate an image. And so all I've done is just trying to like find all of the tools that I would need to maximize my ability to make an image quickly. And with those tools in mind and with the interface, like memorize like where the hotkeys are, the brushes, the tools that I use, I can paint relatively quickly in the software in a matter of minutes because I'm not bogged down by the interface. The interface and me are now one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you were touching on that yesterday about how the interface needs to get out of your way and help you rather than make your life harder while you're using it.
Yes. And the more you understand this, the better you'll be. And it takes time. I'm not going to sit here and say that you can memorize all the hotkeys or create the perfect workflow overnight. It takes time. I think like in about several months to a year, I finally had a workflow that I felt really comfortable, and then I just keep evolving it slightly throughout the years. But it definitely took me like a good like solid year where I'm just like, I think this is a good workflow. I think I have a really good understanding of my tools. And ultimately, what I also learned was that just being a better painter is ultimately one of the better strategies, regardless of the tool. But if the tool is going to give you all of this access to like all these great like ways to make an image, take advantage of it. You know what I mean? I am very grateful and thankful for Photoshop. I have a lot of peers and colleagues that are very critical of this tool, and mainly because they say, well, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? But they're thinking as like artists and painters, and they want like their traditional tools to kind of be simulated in this. So that's why you see other tools that come out that people like feel way more attracted towards because they feel like they're drawing on like a real drawing device. But I'm like, but Photoshop isn't that. And every time you keep trying to like put a square peg into a circle hole, you're gonna always be frustrated. As like it's a square peg put into square hole, and then you'll maximize your ability. And this is why, like when I talked about this yesterday. I did like a speed painting competition in Japan, and they asked me what they can use whatever tool I wanted. I said Photoshop, and it's not because of any other reason, but I think Photoshop is by far one of the greatest tools to create an image. And if you like to paint and you like the feeling of drawing and painting and all that stuff, maybe there are better tools out there for that. But if you want to like really be at the top of your game, because I still know people who use other tools, but then they always kind of come back to Photoshop because they're just like, I don't know, it's unmatched the power of like the tools.
Nora's asking, do you use Fresco for your artwork as well, or strictly Photoshop?
So Photoshop is by far the premier one, but I'm gonna answer. I'll talk more about that one actually in a little bit. But I want to answer the other question that was about school, since
your education.
Yeah, so since that was asked, because that's pretty much all I have to say about the workflow stuff. Obviously, if I had like 5 hours, I could probably talk all about every reason and every hotkey, every tool that I use and why I use it. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to move on and answer questions from here on out. So starting with the art education. So I originally went to a school called Art Institute in Orange County, and that school was definitely garbage. It was hot burning garbage. I don't say that in spite. It sounds like it. There might be a little bit of spite, but because it just was like it was clearly a lie. They didn't really kind of provide the education that I expected. And more importantly, when you go to college, you expect a certain like level of education that's going to be provided to you, and whenever people spend a lot of money, they expect a certain amount of quality, and so I think AI at the time that I was going was like $70,000 for like 3 years. I don't think that's how much it was of actual value. I think it was way less value than that, And then they would like promise stuff like, oh yeah, you are, there's like a 91% placement rate at the school. So they're like luring you in with these numbers. But the reality is like that also includes like if you work at McDonald's after you graduate.
Oh my gosh.
Which, not to knock people who work at McDonald's or any kind of industry in that level. It's just that when you pay like $70,000, you expect that you would be able to get a job that
afterwards,
you need some real accreditation to get, not a job that you could have got before college. Like I don't know if you guys know this, but you could probably work at McDonald's now, without formal education. And that was kind of the reason that I saw that it was kind of garbage. And so I ended up dropping out because it was just not providing the quality that I was looking for, And I don't know if there is such a thing as self-taught. I think what self-taught means to me, at least, is it just means that you're more motivated to find the education that you need. And when you think of it in this regard, I think it makes more sense because if you think of like self-taught, you think like somebody who taught themselves. But technically, like how do you teach yourself something? You need some sort of instruction, even if it's indirect. And so like I would learn from looking at other artists' work, and even though they weren't talking to me directly, I'll just look at it and just analyze it and try to like figure out what they would teach me. I'll look at their sketches, I'll look at their earlier work, I'll see what they may have done that could have made their artwork better and make my artwork better in turn. And I would watch tons and tons and tons of tutorials. And it's funny to say, because I don't think that I'm that old. I'm 35 years old. But it's funny to say, like, there was a time where YouTube was not a thing. Right? Like, it's kind of crazy to think, like not even, I think, like 12 years ago, like, beginning of my career, YouTube just started. Right?
Yeah.
So imagine, like, there was a time where YouTube was just cat videos and, like, planes landing. That's all it was. And so I didn't ever use YouTube because YouTube was not a thing, So we had to like watch something called Gnomon DVDs, which were like paid videos, right? You had to buy these physical copies. I don't know if you guys know what a DVD is. A DVD is this plastic disc with information on it, all right? For those of you, the young viewers who are like, what the heck's a DVD? It's funny to think that that's even like, some people might not even know what that is.
Yeah, that is crazy.
And so we used to watch DVDs, and I would watch tons of DVDs. And there was a time where people used to like steal this content and put it on places like Napster, Shazam, LimeWire. And again, for those of you who are like, what are all these things? What do you mean, like, steal? It's like, yeah, there was no such thing as YouTube, where everything was kind of just available to you. And so there was like college students like myself that try to find ways to get access to this type of education. And so when I think of self-taught, I think more of like, I was just more inclined to just try
Seek
to
out the information
wherever it
yourself.
was available. And me and my friends were all like this, and we were all go out and like, oh, did you see that new video by so and so, or oh, did you download that file that I got, you know? And so we would just help each other in that way, you know. And I think now, like, it's clear to me there is an ungodly amount of information available to everybody at a very reasonable cost. Myself included, is like, I have video content that is only a few dollars to purchase, and I also do a lot of streams and videos on YouTube for people to have access to for no cost. You know, and so it's clear that this is kind of the new way of learning. And now people are running into this new problem, which is basically an abundance of information. And I think this is a good problem to have, but it is still a problem where you feel overwhelmed. Like, where do you start? And my advice usually is just pick something and just go. Like, don't worry about whether it's the best information. Just know that you're getting it, and you'll know in time that it's whether it was good or not, you know? But this kind of idea of like fear of starting is unnecessary. You should just start, and you'll figure it out as you go. But like I said, when I started, I guess it was a lot easier because there was only one source of information for education in concept art, you know? And it was Gnomon DVDs.
Wow.
So, yeah. But I was a college dropout, and I did fine. Yeah, I encourage people to drop out of college a lot of time. And it's funny because I work in places, like I worked for colleges, and I'll tell them in the college, like, you guys
You're like,
don't
you're
need
wasting your time and money here.
Yeah, I would say it much differently, a little bit more like, you know, like, don't rely entirely on everything you're learning here. Like, be a little bit more proactive outside of school, you know? I think another problem that people have is that they go to these places and they expect that at the end they're guaranteed an opportunity. And I think that's a false reality you're living in if you think of that. And it's important not to think this way.
Having a degree does not equal getting a job after necessarily.
Yeah. In fact, specifically, I can only speak to art. I think a lot of the people in the art industry, they really only care about your quality of work and whether you're a cool person or not, right? I think those are like the two factors that require a hire. If you are a good person, or you have like good work. You can be a really good artist, but if you're kind of a jerk, you know, people don't like to work with people like that, you know? And having a degree doesn't necessarily change anything if your work is not good. I always like to tell people, like, when it comes to education, like, you need to get an education that's going to build a portfolio, you know? And if some schools can do that for you, and others can't. You know, other schools will make you do curriculum type stuff that put you in a position where you're learning a skill that you might not actually use. And that's ultimately a waste of your efforts. And I used to go to classes where I would do stuff that I knew I didn't want to do, like, at all as a profession, but I had to do it because that was part of what I had to do to get points to graduate. And so what I would do is I would talk to the teacher and be like, hey, is it okay if, like, I draw in class and, like, work on my concept art portfolio? And most of my teachers were like, yeah, that's cool. Like, don't worry about it. And they're like, just do the midterm and the final, and then we're good here. And I would pass the class with like a C minus, but it didn't matter to me, right? I was just trying to pass the class so I can get those credits at the time. you know? And my teachers were super cool. They're like, no, they get it. Because they saw that I was drawing. It wasn't like I was like, they knew that I was very persistent.
That you're working on
Yeah,
something
like
too.
every
that-
class I was
yeah.
drawing. And outside of class, I would be drawing and they would see that. So they knew that I wasn't playing around, you know? I wasn't just trying to get away from it. Because there's other kids at my school that were just playing like Street Fighter and Smash Brothers. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what are you guys doing? You know? Like you guys know you're spending money, you know,
Yeah.
to be here. And I had that foresight that I knew like I needed to kind of focus a little bit.
So in about 4 minutes, we have our chat and win. Make sure you get in the chat, everyone, and you can win 100 stickers from Sticker Mule. So that's coming up soon. I see a few questions about your setup, actually. We didn't
Okay,
talk
cool.
about that today. So you could just talk about, what Wacom tablet you're using.
Yeah, sure. So I'm using the small little Wacom tablet right here, and I'm using a just like laptop for my workstation. It's just a gaming laptop, and the laptop this is my workstation. This is what I use to do everything. This is my computer. I don't have a tower at home. I don't have anything like that. This is pretty much it. So this is my work setup. The only difference, and I talked about this yesterday, is that I have a monitor as well in front of me. And I have a standing desk at home too. So I stand and I basically just have my arms a little bit lower at like a right angle is the bend in my arm. And I just look at a monitor that's about 2 to 3 feet away from my face. And that's it. And I like using a Wacom tablet versus something like a Cintiq. I like Cintiqs too, man. They have a different purpose. Wacom just sent me a Wacom 1, and I love it. I think the Wacom 1 is a really good entry level, but it's also just a really good, like, small, portable, like, it kind of is like perfect with the setup that I have. And I like Cintiq specifically for drawing, right? If you're drawing, like, you kind of do want to, like, be on the screen to draw. But as I was saying yesterday, if you are doing this for the long term and you're like hunched over, a lot of the time you're gonna end up having back pains and like wrist pains even. And so I prefer the setup because it allows me to like draw from a distance. Does that make sense? Like I
Yeah.
can like see my whole image. I don't necessarily have to like hunch
Get in
over
and out
to
a
draw.
lot.
Yeah, I have mostly a good posture whenever I'm drawing, standing up.
I saw another question about how you started this drawing, and you started with the background and you kind of started adding some larger shapes, and then I saw you were making some gradients as well.
Okay.
Right? In
Yes.
the beginning.
Yes, and so the way that I started this painting is that let me just do this first. Let me just kind of have it blank. I would put texture in, and then I would then throw the gradations. And the reason why I have texture and gradations is that it creates a sense of depth, and then it gives me something that's not entirely blank. Yesterday, I did it where it was just a blank background, and I just started drawing with like a round brush. And that was mostly just to demonstrate, like, you don't really need many tools to kind of just get started. But when you're doing a painting like this, where you're trying to be a little bit more, put a little bit more expression to it, it's kind of nice to have some like sense of environment. Like if you look over here, like that noise kind of looks like maybe there's like trees in the background and
Yeah.
there's like a opening of light. You
Sorry
know?
to interrupt, but we got 10 seconds until our chat and win.
Sure, go for it.
So everyone, get in the chat, ask us some questions, let us know where you're tuning in from, and we'll be right back. Hey everyone, we're back. What's up, Gabby, Victor, Mohammed?
Stickers
hey,
are cool.
Brandon. Let's see who's gonna win the stickers. Iowa, Atlanta, Georgia. Yes, Sticker Meal is great. I'm in a college class. Well, I'm glad you're learning
Not that
here as
not
well. Miami, Austin.
Okay, cool. I'm stuck at work and need these stickers.
Jordan, Michelle, what's up, everyone? Robzilla. All right, congratulations, Leah Dents. You just won 100 free stickers. Woo!
Oh, nice.
And then everyone else, you can go to stickermeal.com/Adobe Live 20 to get a really awesome deal. I think it's 10 stickers for $1, which is really awesome if you still want those stickers. So we were just talking about texture
Yes.
in your painting.
Yeah, so basically, I use it because I know this is going to be a little bit more illustrative. And so I kind of have it, so it just inspires a sense of environment, and that's kind of why I do it. It's really nothing more than that. It's more of just like an artistic like license, if that makes sense. It's not so there's nothing entirely I don't know, like I wouldn't say like entirely like, oh, you better do this or you won't be able to draw something. I could have easily done this without the background. It just adds this more like dimension to it, that's all. And I put it in when I'm doing illustration like concepts, like character artwork like this. And again, it just inspires a little bit more of like, oh, I'm gonna push this into lighting and put some space into this a little bit more. Yeah, so that's usually what I do when I think about textures in the beginning. Oh, thank you so much.
Nurse asking, do you know how many layers you've created in this artwork up until now?
Refreshing. I'm super parched.
Now I'm gonna have some.
Yeah, I came in a little later, like right on the wire, and I haven't really talked until I sat down.
Yeah, today,
Yeah,
yet.
and so like my voice is just like, what are you doing, dude? Like you didn't warm up at all. So let me drink some water and I'll answer that. So I only have one layer. I don't need more than one layer for this image. I think I understand why people ask about like layers, and I think it's like a weird flex to be like, oh yeah, all one layer, dude, And I get why it's so impressive to think about like, oh, a person uses very few layers. But the reality is like going back to like paper and pencil, like you only really have one layer on paper and pencil too, right? And it also promotes good habits to try to not use too many layers if you're just practicing, especially. And I keep that very clear. Like it's really important that whenever you practice, you should not think about too many layers, because whenever you're doing designs and you're doing like actual professional work, you should use however or how many layers you possibly need to make a good image. Okay, but if you're just like practicing or you're just drawing for yourself, you should try to get in the habit of not using too many, because it's going to promote confidence in your abilities, and you're going to start to recognize more flaws more often. Because if you're constantly relying on a tool to cover up your mistakes often, then you're kind of never adjusting or correcting your skills as much as you should be. Another thing is like try to do less undos. If you can prevent doing undos altogether, you should do that too. Again, whenever you're practicing, I think it's important when you're studying and working on getting better, you should try to do things that make it harder for you, not easier for you. So that way you're practicing challenge, And so I only use one layer, not because it's like I said, it's not like I'm flexing on you guys. I don't need any more than one layer for this type of image. I painted this type of image many, many times before. This is not completely new to me. Like I draw this type of stuff very often. I did this kind of illustration if you go to like my Instagram already, but better. And it was mostly to train for today's workshop, I was like, okay, I want to paint something like this on the second day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that way I come in and I can paint and talk with even more confidence, because that's a hard thing to do. I'm sure if you guys watch many of these streams with other artists, they probably aren't talking as much, because they're like focusing on making good artwork.
Yeah.
And that's very important. And whenever I'm like trying to work, I do the same thing. I don't talk. I'm like focusing on the task because it's usually a task that I have to think about. Like I have to think literally about every thing because I'm designing for somebody else. But whenever it's time to like render, or I'm just like, you know, making the image like a final completed image and all the information's already available to me, I don't necessarily need to pay attention anymore. It's now like noodle town. I just like render, and I don't think about anything. That's when I usually put on a podcast or a TV show because it's super boring. And I'll actually like fall asleep while I'm painting. I'm like,
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, what am I doing here? You know, I mean, it can only be so engaging to render like a belt buckle. You know what I mean? And so. But it's necessary for completion, and so I usually can talk during demonstrations too because I do this professionally. I'm a professional educator, and I do demos and talk at the same time all the time. My mentorship, there's a section where it's called the Q&A, and that's literally all I do. I paint something, and then people ask me questions, and I just answer them. You know, so they get a little bit of twofer. They get to see how I'm painting.
Yeah.
You know, and then they can ask me like questions, whether they're professional, personal, it doesn't matter, you know? And if it's really thought provoking, then I'll stop, you know, and talk about it.
There's a question about when you're doing character design, is there any particular genre or visual style that you lean more into? Sci-fi, fantasy, specific time periods, creatures?
Yeah. So I like things that are clearly like cater to like a masculine audience. If that is a thing that you can think about, like you think about movies like Transformers, Fast and the Furious, and then like horror movies. It's overtly masculine. It's like gung ho. Like I'm really a big fan of like the John Wick franchise. Does that make sense? Like like where John Wick in that movie is all he is just like a force of nature. Like there's no plot really. It's just like, they killed my dog, they took my car, now everyone's dead. You know? And then it's more like a disaster film, right? It's not necessarily an action movie. It's just like a hurricane has just awoken, and he's just going through the city, destroying everything. Wow. And that's the kind of genre that I enjoy to work on. Like anything that's like in that genre, like from it's scary to sci-fi to fantasy. But the kind of media that I really consume a lot of and that I actually love is actually mostly animation, right? Like I love Pixar movies. In fact, I remember the first time I realized how much I love those franchise, like those films, was when the first Fast and the Furious movie came out. Finding Nemo also came out, right? That's like the same weekend, I believe. And I was with my friend and his girlfriend at the time, and they were like, "Hey, let's go watch Finding Nemo." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "You guys want to watch a kids movie?" Like, like I want to watch.
What about Fast and Furious?
Yeah, I want to watch Fast and Furious. That movie looks amazing, you know. And it was. I loved it. I ended up watching it eventually, but we decided to go watch Finding Nemo instead. And reluctantly, you know, I was like, "Oh my gosh, all right, whatever." You know, they outvoted me, but they convinced me. They were like, "No, it's really, really good." You know, like everyone's saying it's like really amazing. It's not like a kid's movie. It's like a really good movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, whatever, dude. You guys don't know what you're talking about. And so we ended up watching it. And I left that theater, and I was like, I was in tears, man. I was like, that movie was so good.
Oh.
I was like, it's so sweet.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, dang. And I remember how that movie hit me so hard. And then after that, I became like a diehard Pixar fan. I was like, nah, Pixar movies are amazing. And so every movie that came out after that, like WALL-E, classic, Up, classic, you know, like all these movies now hold a special place in my heart. Like if I were to list like my top 5 favorite movies,
let's hear them. Yeah.
Well, like I'm just gonna say like one of them is WALL-E. You know, and I don't mean like top 5 favorite animated films. I'm saying like top 5
Ever,
movies.
of all movies.
Yeah. And it's like 2 of them are animated films in those top 2, or in the top 5, and one of them is WALL-E. And then my other favorite one, animated film, is actually like a religious movie, but I think I just like it for the art. And it's I keep forgetting the name of it. It's the one with Moses, The Prince of Egypt.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I love that movie mostly because of like it was like stunning. I remember thinking when I watched it, I was like, dude, this is an amazingly well built movie. And one of my favorite artists work on it too. Just it has a lot of sentimental value in terms of just artistry, you know. And I wish more animated films were built in that way. You know what I mean? I think the Miyazaki films come really close to. They're in a whole different genre, but like they're kind of close to that kind of. You know, you can do a lot more in 2D than you can in 3D in live action. But anyway, you know, so that's the kind of genre of movies that like I like or entertainment that I actually like the most. Like very happy, very fun. You know, very positive.
Feel good
Yeah.
movies, yeah.
I enjoy those more. Like, because my all-time favorite movie is Forrest Gump. Okay. But in terms of work, it's everything I just mentioned before. It's just like, because when it comes to painting, that's just what I like to paint.
Yeah.
Does this make sense?
Yeah.
A good way of thinking about this, I always like to tell my students, is that I'm a real big fan of a video game called Uncharted. And Uncharted is kind of like this Indiana Jones type video game where you're like an adventurer, right? And you like kind of like explore and discover like new things in the world and treasures. And it's very story driven, and I love it. It's one of my favorite video games I've ever played. But I don't know if I would like working on that video game because it's very contemporary, right? Like they have like contemporary outfits like khakis and
Okay.
like-
It's not like outer worldly.
yeah, they have elements like this, but not enough that would warrant my like work. I think they only need really one artist, and they already got a really good one. You know, where other games like the God of War franchise would need tons of artists to do fantasy designs, and so that's a good example of a genre of games that I like, but I don't necessarily know if I would work there. And then there's like the Skyrim games. I don't know if you know anything about that, but like Skyrim is like this open world fantasy game. I am not a fan of those games, right? Like I don't like them at all. I get very bored playing them, you know? I know objectively like a lot of people love this game, but I personally do not. But if like Bethesda was to reach out to me and be like, hey, you know, we want you to work on some creature designs, I would be all in.
Yeah.
Because of that genre of the world is like really cool, and I would love to make stuff for that world, and it would be
Yeah.
fun. Even though I would probably
Not the game though.
yeah, they would send me the game, I wouldn't play it. You know? Like even with all my designs in there. And I've actually worked on projects where I don't know if I would like the movie or the video game, but I loved working on it. You know, and I think that's an interesting kind of position to think about. Like, and I think a lot of times people think that you have to love the genre of art that you're making, like that whole genre. Like I don't like horror films. Like I'm not like a horror junkie, but I work on a lot of horror films. You know.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, they don't scare me. I don't really get frightened. The only movie that scared me recently was Hereditary. Yeah, and that one wasn't really like a monster horror movie.
It was
you
more
know?
like eerie, right? I haven't seen that one, but I saw Midsummer, which
heard
is
that
by the
was-
same, I think, director.
I heard that was really trippy.
It
too.
was very disturbing.
Yeah, so that kind of genre is more in line of what I do. But again, could you imagine what would I do for that project?
Yeah.
You know, but I like that genre of horror. I don't like the kind of genre that I actually designed for. Not because I don't think that it's good. I just it doesn't frighten me. I really feel like it's kind of like I am not my suspension of disbelief is not there. I'm like nah, I don't know, you know. Where for whatever reason, movies like Hereditary, I'm like, dude, this is creepy.
Yeah, it could be.
It's
real.
a slow burn. yeah. But hopefully that kind of gives you some insight, even for some of you guys to think about. Like, don't always think that what you love is what you like in terms of indulging is what you should do. In fact, I think there should be some separation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can like kind of enjoy that different genre, and just work on a whole different genre and just have like separation. Because I could see a scenario where you work a lot and then you end up hating, you know, the very thing that you used to love. I can see that actually happen a lot more than
You're
you
just
would think.
too exposed to it.
Yeah. All right. Was there any other questions actually?
Yeah. What other questions do you all have for Anthony?
Yeah. So right now, while I'm waiting for some more questions, right now I'm starting to think about what I can do differently with this helmet, and so I'm gonna make like a pretty major change. I'm just gonna like grab it and move it, and I'm gonna see what happens if I use one of the really awesome tools that Photoshop has, which is Content Aware Move tool, and I'm just gonna move it, right, and rotate it, and then see if Photoshop can paint my painting for me, right? We'll see if this works. Yeah, I didn't do too bad of a job. Yeah.
It kind of adjusted it to fit back in
Yeah.
to the rest of the painting. That's cool.
Yeah, and so this is kind of the point I was making earlier about like, Photoshop is not a painting tool. It's a photo manipulation tool with great painting features. And if you can kind of take that to its advantage, you can do some really cool stuff that you would never be able to do in a painting tool. In fact, a lot of what I see online too from other softwares, they take a lot of inspiration from what's great about Photoshop, and they also try to expand on what's different from it, so that they can try to like separate themselves. And that actually brings me back to, I remember a question about Fresco. People were asking if I do
Yes,
things
that's
in
right.
Fresco. So currently, Fresco, I know they're still developing it to make it even primarily a painting tool. Because again, I think a lot of people were looking at Photoshop as that, but I keep reminding my peers, like, no, Photoshop has never been that.
It wasn't created for that. That
Yeah.
wasn't the purpose of that tool. But Fresco has been created for drawing and painting.
Yeah. So it's the first, round. It's obviously gonna have things that you're gonna expect to have, and it's not there yet. And I've talked to the designers, and I've met many of them.
I'm a designer on Fresco,
Yeah.
actually. Yes.
And they're very aware. They're not like, oh, we don't know what's going on in the industry. They're not like, oh, what's art? Like, clearly they're aware, but it's not like the only thing that Adobe does. Adobe clearly does lots of different things, and so they're like, no, we might finally need to have like an actual division just for the artists and make a tool for them, And so I think like any kind of criticism or concern you may have, you should always bring it to them, and they'll listen. They're knocking it down. I talked to one of the designers, and we had like a really long, lengthy conversation. And she like quite literally was like, well, what do you think? Like, what's missing? Like, what other tools do you use? What do you like about the other tools that you think could be helpful? Or what do you think is missing from those tools? And what do you not like about ours? And all this stuff. And I told him with no pulling back. And she's like, no, that's all that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the most helpful for us. We have a long list of features that we know people need, that we know people want, that are coming, that we're just trying to tackle on like which one to do first, and how we're gonna approach this, and how are we gonna make it better than we have before. And it's so helpful to see you guys getting into Fresco and going into suggesting a feature for us, letting us know what's confusing, and tweeting at us and giving us all of your comments, because that helps us make the tool better for you. So we're very open to the feedback and to the suggestions as well. It helps us prioritize a lot of things, because we have long lists of, we got to get this and we need this thing that we haven't had built yet. And when you say, we all really want this is the most important thing that I need right now, we're like, okay, let's put that to the top and let's spend our energy building that first.
Yeah. And I think I understand why there's a lot of like, especially from my community, like specifically the concept art industry, I can see why like there was a lot of just like immediate like, criticism, because, they expected, because after all these years of using like Photoshop, they were really wanting something that just out of the box just worked really, 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 really well. But like I tell everybody, like, there's tools, like even the tools that they love, that they use in different avenues, they weren't great when they first started. There's a popular 3D software, for instance, that just is like completely free, and only recently they released like a 2.8 version of their software. Has it like really started taking off? But this software has been around for quite a long time, and everything just takes time. And ultimately, there's just going to be people that have teams. They're just going to pick. It doesn't matter if the tool is finally evolved.
They're just going to stay in that camp.
Yes, and my advice to everybody is to use the tools that are going to make you make great artwork. Try to not focus on whether like this one's better than that. For instance, I like using Wacom tablets, but I also like using my iPad. You know, and currently I'm not using like Fresco as my premier mobile tool, but I still use Photoshop. I don't feel like there's any tool that is better. I've tried many of them, you know, and I just can't see it. And I am almost certain Fresco is going to be at some point a real contender eventually, because there's some real push for it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's only going to be inevitable, right? And so I think it's kind of like, I think it's a little short-sighted to kind of already write off tools when they're just starting, you know?
Yep, this is the first release. This is the our MVP.
Yeah. It's not wise in my opinion, because there is this kind of weird thing that you might accidentally put into yourself, this kind of pride and ego that will prevent you from using another tool. And this actually happened to me recently, because my friend was suggesting me to use this thing on the iPad. And I was like, nah, I don't know. I kind of used this already. And he was just like, use it.
You're like, I'm not interested.
Yeah, he was like yelling at me. Yeah, he was so mad. He was getting his hair cut. And he's like, I'm going to call you right now.
Yeah.
And he was like yelling at me on the phone. And I was like, all right, I'll try it. And then he was right. I ended up loving it, you know? So that's what I'm saying. It's like detrimental to your own abilities. And I think as the industry grows, the tools are going to constantly be changing. I know, like, for instance, people who use like old versions of Photoshop, like CS5. And for those of you who are like, what's CS5 or CS2? What's the CS? What does that mean? Well, Photoshop, that's how they used to be labeled. It was like CS and then a number. And even before that, it was like elements. And it was just, I actually know a couple of people who use elements. Like, they just will not use the latest and greatest version of Photoshop. And I always encourage people to. And then, again, I'm here at Adobe Live, and you guys brought me out here, and you guys are taking care of me. But I've been saying this even before. In fact, I'm like kind of like, it's about time you guys bring me out here, and because I've been always telling people, like, literally, there's probably like videos of me on YouTube too, me saying like, you get the subscription model. In fact, I encourage all the other software, especially, in fact, the smaller ones, they should also do some sort of submodel that's reasonable, because this is a tool I've been using my whole professional career, and it was buggy, and it was like heartbreak, very early stages of the tool. But then when it started going to submodel, you get patches and updates very often. And I have been using this my whole career, and I've been working, and it's provided for my family. I have always wanted to be able to support the tools that I love. There's a 3D software that I sculpt with a lot, and they didn't have that kind of model. And I always thought it was crazy. Recently they did. They changed. They realized they needed to do this. And the reason why is because it's bizarre to me is because you have a company like ILM, like a major visual effects studio. They can buy 10, 15, 20 seats from this company. It may cost them 20 grand up front. But after that, they own it forever. They don't have to keep paying this company anymore. And a decade goes later, they literally make tens, maybe even hundreds of billions of dollars from the movies that they've made using the software. I think the company should get a little bit of that, is all I'm saying. Like, I don't think it's unreasonable that the company's like, hey, can we get like just a little bit of that? Just like
it's enabled you.
Yeah, and I my favorite model that I've seen softwares use is like the tier level, where it's like if you're just like an indie user or just like a personal user, it's like a very reasonable cost.
Yeah.
And then it goes like, if you make X amount of dollars a year, like if you're a corporation or a company, then we're gonna go for you. We're gonna like ask you for thousands of dollars a month, because those companies can't afford it, and they should, because they're reaping the value from using these great tools. And so I actually am like, I kind of want like people that, like, especially softwares that I think are really good and have really good intentions, they should do it. And that's why when Adobe did it, I was all in. And again, it was a controversy for sure. I remember a lot of people were like, what? How dare they? And I was like, I can't wait. And because I just know that the value of that comes from that, you know? And I understand there's like the perception that comes from like, you know, submodel. And I think everybody in the chat are, you know, they're probably Adobe fans and users, and they probably agree with the sentiment of like, no, we want to support the tools that make us a living, you know?
And then supporting the tools makes it
better
for us to make the tools better. It makes it so that we have more designers, more engineers, more time to improve the tool and to do more research too. We spend a lot of time and effort and money into talking to all of you guys, testing with you, sending you messages, how is this doing, you know? And that takes time as well to understand our users.
Yeah, and again, I want to make it very clear. It's not like you guys paid me to say any of this stuff because it kind of seems like I'm making like an advertisement for it. No, I legit use this tool since the beginning of time, you know, and it became easier for me to really subscribe. And I remember you guys offered me, because you guys started to, you know, work with me more. You guys were like, oh, we can give it to you for free, you know, because of just like what value I'm helping you guys provide for your guys' platform. I understand that transaction, but I was like, no, it's fine. I like paying for it.
Yeah, you're like, I will support you.
No, the principle of it,
Yeah.
right? Like I have believed in this process, and I feel like that's true for other stuff. Like when artists and content creators create tutorials, merchandise on like YouTube. I think you should be helping these people out. Give them a little bit of your time, a little bit of your money, so that they can keep creating the things that you care about, right? It's just, you know, there's that stigma that comes behind it. Everybody always wants to root for the underdog, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm with that. I understand that principle too. I'm with you on this. And so you see the smaller companies that are like not doing that, and they're like, oh, see, they're not doing it. But I have a feeling they're going to eventually do it because they're going to start to realize that it's not as sustainable as they would hope, you know? And
Yeah.
I don't want them to go down. I want them to be around too. I want everybody to be around, and I want everybody to keep making great tools for all of us. And I don't want one company to override another one. I want everybody to like have some sense of like oh, these guys. I remember I was talking to one of the designers, and she's like, I saw when they did this, because she actually went to like you guys as competitors and was talking to them, and was like, she was like, oh, this feature you guys just added is a really cool idea, you know. And so it's not like she's like,
it's not like we're
like setting their booth on fire at Live.
No.
She was actually very. She was like, wow, this is actually very smart. And they actually talk to each other. It's not like this like secret behind closed doors that nobody like talks to each other. There is like a sense of competition for sure, but also just like in the art community, I look at an artist that's clearly better than me. I don't necessarily get so mad at them that I don't want them to be successful. I admire them as well as I'm like, I wish
You're like, wow,
I was a little bit better.
That's a great idea, a great design, a great way you've done that.
And I think that's the best part of the industry, is that also that respect. And I think we should try to help maintain that. And I think it's important that you, again, I don't want to like deviate too much. I want to make you guys understand like that it's all about whatever tool makes you feel the most comfortable, okay? And some tools are just going to do it better than others, and it's just how it is, you know? And everybody has different tools, because even with Wacom, like I love Wacom, but I know people who just don't want to use Wacom tablets. They want to use some other tablet that's available to them. And because of that, Wacom's like, okay, well then how can we make our tool better, you know,
and cater to that as well.
And so you guys should just make, you know, make them work for that money, you know what I mean? And I think it's really important to support the brands that you actually enjoy and the people that you think are actually making a difference in your life through your career, and hope that they listen, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Edgar has a question from France. He says, super cool content, Anthony. Can you talk about your brushes? Yeah,
sure. So I'm using like a series of texture brushes. So yesterday I only used like just the round brush. But I'll talk about like brushes and the importance of brushes. And so I'm going to drink some water first. I'm a little parched. Hold on. So there is this kind of concept that like you shouldn't really focus on the brushes, you know, and the reason why is because a lot of times people think like the brushes might like give like a slight advantage to some sort of ability that you didn't have access to. And I guess the greatest analogy that I can think of, or one of the better ones, is like when you think about a runner wearing like a really nice pair of shoes that they're super light, super efficient, whatever, and it gives them that advantage. And so you think, oh, I want to buy those same shoes so I can also have that advantage. And I like to think of it this way because, first of all, you just got to be running at a competitive level for that to even be an advantage.
And make a difference, yeah.
If you can't finish a race, the shoes is not going to all of a sudden make you finish a race. And I like to use that as an example because I think brushes are the same way, where brushes will make an image come together in a different way and will really bring it to life depending on how you use them. But if you don't have like foundational knowledge of how to draw and paint, then it's not going to help you. And I usually encourage people to pick like a brush that they feel the most comfortable with and just practice painting. And then when you have this like kind of like this solid foundation, then try these different brushes to see how they can add to your already built skill versus just like going in and hoping that something's going to come out because you're using these cool brushes. But with that being said, I do think brushes do have an advantage depending on how you use them. And so I can talk about that now. So I like using the round brush because it doesn't really discriminate, right? And what I mean by this is like it's omnidirectional, right? There's no direction to it. It's completely circular. It's a circle brush. And then I just put some opacity to it and no texture so that it has no opinion about what's going to happen next. It's completely neutral. So then it really allows me to just draw and design with only designing and drawing in mind, right? I don't have another variable that I'm concerned about. I am only focused on what I'm drawing. You know what I mean?
And these other variables, they could be texture and like the print,
the
brush
direction,
print,
yes,
the tilt, kind of.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So now we take a brush like this that has a very strong opinion.
Yes,
okay?
I see.
Like the brush shape itself is like crazy, right? The pen tilt is like kind of erratic. It's not giving me a choice as much as I would like to.
Yeah.
But you can see that maybe this is a good brush to sketch in a dynamic shape or line, right? Like let's say I want to design something, like design a character silhouette, and I just want it to feel a little bit spontaneous. And I'm going to use my natural tendencies of how I would draw a character silhouette along with using this crazy brush, you know, that will help potentially inspire me to think differently, right? But it's like I don't have as much control as I want, but I'm kind of deliberately wanting that lack of control because look at how dynamic this feels,
Yeah,
you know?
wow.
Where
Very
if I'm
cool.
like, yeah, but if I'm like, no, I want like total control, then I would use like a circle brush and doing the same thing. But now I'm like in total control. But you can see like there's something nice and dynamic about this. And there's nothing stopping me from going back and correcting some of this erratic shape behavior, you know? Right? And like actually having some solidarity in some places. But then like, you know, the way that this was formed, I'm kind of okay with this. You know, I'm okay with like the way this is kind of crazy feeling, you know?
Looks cool.
But I'm gonna like clean it up now. And then I have like brushes that are a little bit like in between. Like this is just a triangle brush. Because a triangle is like by its nature is a dynamic brush. But because again it has one direction, it's always gonna go downwards. Doesn't matter if I'm going sideways or whatever. It will allow me to still have some control, but it's also somewhat dynamic. So it's kind of a good middle brush for these two kind of states. But you can see how these brushes have like, they discriminate and like how they want to be used. And other brushes will have different effects. So I have like this brush that I made, which when you push very lightly, it gives you kind of this like real, like noisy, but like very, it's very soft. But unlike some of the other texture brushes, like as soon as I put some pressure, right? So that's a little bit of pressure, but just a little bit, it goes immediately to opaque. So like it's like exponential. It's not like gradual where my round brush is gradual. Where like if I push lightly, it makes sense. If I push a little harder, that makes sense. The value that it's at, you know, like it's like a gradual buildup. So I can rely on that. This brush is similar to that. It has a gradual buildup, but it's basically like a cousin of that brush, you know, or this brush is a cousin of this brush, right? Where I wanted this brush specifically just to have just like this super noisy thing, and then also just like opaque. It's like in between.
Yeah.
And some other brushes are like, yeah, this one just has noise to it. It's just nice and noisy, and it's directional. Right, so depending on the direction, the brush shape will change, its rotation, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And this brush is really good for like, kind of like pen, like making it feel like a brush pen somewhat, or like ink, you know? And so these brushes all have a purpose and have a place in my heart, you know? And like I have like an airbrush, but not just an airbrush, like it has some noise to it.
Okay.
So that might be good for like a foggy environment, where I have an airbrush that's made just to soften forms, and this one does not have a. Let me go somewhere. Yeah, this one does not have noise to it. I mean, there's some noise, but that's just more of the artifacting of an airbrush, where this one's like very obvious noise, like it feels kind of like dust particles in the air, you know. And when you have like, so for instance, like I would most likely use the noise one with a little bit of the regular airbrush on this painting, because this one has texture. This painting has texture, so it's kind of okay if I use like the noise brush. It kind of matches the narrative of this design, right? And then I can use changing the brush mode with hotkeys. So now I'm in color dodge, and so now it's going to create like this kind of effect that's a little bit more natural when it comes to lighting, like a natural bloom too, you know?
Very cool, yeah. It's really bringing out those highlights.
Yeah, absolutely. And so knowing like the intention of your brush will drive better images, you know? If you don't know the intention of your brush, like you don't know what to expect, and you're just painting and it's just like wild and erratic, or you see somebody paint something and you just kind of copy what they painted so it feels good what you've painted, but then you go to paint an original design that has nothing to do with the same subject matter, or it's just like a little bit different in terms of how you should paint it, and the brush just starts to fail you miserably. Like that's kind of the point of like having that strong principled idea versus just like, oh, I got this series of brushes. Yeah, I'm going to be like setting up my Patreon today, and part of what I'm going to do is make brushes, and I'm going to put them out there for the patrons.
What's the Patreon?
Oh, it's just Robot Pencil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's actually up already, but I'm like officially going to launch it like later tonight and tomorrow, and I'm going to release the brushes, and then I'm also going to talk about how to use the brushes, and so that way, I think a lot of times people just have brushes, and then they just have a video of them using it, and it's like, cool, dude. But like,
so are these yours that you've made?
Some of them are other people's brushes, and some of them are mine. So the ones that I think that are universally available, I'm just gonna have. I already have them available on my website. You can just go and get these brushes right now, for instance, without paying anything, because I didn't really pay for them either. So it kind of feels weird. But there are a lot of brushes that I have made that are mine, and I always make brushes, like constantly. And so you'll be able to obviously use these brushes if you follow my Patreon. And if you use Fresco, you can use these brushes in Fresco, because it's most likely to be all Photoshop brushes.
Yeah.
And maybe brushes of other tools, but like I like Photoshop brushes a lot.
Yeah, once you download Anthony's brushes, you can go into Fresco and import them, and you'll use them there.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about Fresco, actually, is that I can just use the brushes. It's like you can put them in your library.
Yeah, and it'll just appear. You don't even have to import them.
It's actually pretty convenient, and I like that feature. That alone, like the whole contiguous, like there's no, like I have to like
no back and forth.
Yeah,
it's just there for you.
Pretty nice. I like it. I think it's really helpful.
I have a question for you, Anthony. Do you ever use color in your work?
I do. In fact, I think that's how much time do we have?
We have 20 minutes until our
Okay. I can do
design
another painting.
feedback.
Let's
Yeah.
do another one. I do. My favorite way to paint is without color.
Without color.
Yeah, and it's not because I hate color and I think color is an abomination to nature. It's just that color's an illusion, right? It's really, I mean, most things that we see in this world is some sense of an illusion because it's our brain like interpreting reality, right? And I'm not trying to get too crazy and philosophical on that. I'm just saying that's just kind of how it is. And color is one of those things that make people go ooh ah when they see it, but it's actually like interchangeable. And I'll show you once I'm done with this painting. You'll see, and it's like kind of crazy how I may have started with one color setup, and I just say, I'm gonna just completely change the colors now.
And right now you're just adding these gradients in, playing around, seeing what colors work well together.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just start painting something. I'm just like laying in a basic groundwork. But here's my point. I still don't paint in color. Like I'm using color, obviously, like this is color, but I'm still actually thinking in value. Okay? And you'll see as I will make some erratic changes to this, what I mean by this. And so right now I'm like, designing the silhouette of my character, and for instance, this brush, if you guys were curious, this brush is done by an artist named, he goes by the alias Pelang, and to spell it out, it's P-E-L-E-N-G. So if you just Google that guy and like his brushes, you'll find like a lot of the brushes that I use and some other ones that I don't use. But this one specifically is for sure his brush. I know it is. At least I got it from him. I don't know where he got his from, but it's available. So I paint in values because it's the most reliable way to get your design across. I think a lot of times when people are painting in color and they're like, oh, my colors always come out wrong, or I don't feel like I like my colors the way they are perceived or whatever. The reality is most likely it's that your values are the one that's garbage, and you should check your values more often. And when people start to check their values more often, usually their paintings come together a little bit better. And so I have like these students who will submit work to me, and they'll say that, it'll be, oh, my colors are like really weird, I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. And then I'll turn off the color, right? I'll just like take it to a black and white image, and then I'll just completely fix it as a black and white state, and then I'll just put the color back on, right? And I'll demonstrate that later. And they're just like, what the? And it's like corrected, and it's more the colors are even more vibrant, and they can't believe it. They're
it's
like, what?
The contrast that you need, right? The
Well,
range of that. And
well, like here's what I'm thinking is happening is that colors are actually, when I say they're an illusion, what I'm saying is that they're more like subjective than people might want to believe. Now there are some good like hard science to like light and color, right? Especially when it comes to like temperature. But and I mean like actual heat and temperature, I'm not talking about like temperature of color.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not necessarily saying that's an illusion. I'm saying like you can make something a different color entirely if the values are solid. And what's really the illusion is whether the colors made that image look that way. And so what I've discovered with all my studying and practicing is that what is continuous, what's like constant, is values. Okay? Meaning like the forms, like how the light is actually hitting just as a black and white shape. You understand? Like just the actual form of the object, not the color. And so I already got some color in here, and you guys are probably like, oh, that's pretty cool, man. I like what you've done, And I can add some like, mixing of like cool colors in the shadow areas to make it look a little bit more like painterly, And I'm going to keep doing this. And then I'm just going to completely change the color on you guys, right? And it's still going to work.
Cool.
Right? And you're going to be like, wait, what the? And then you're going to be like, color's an illusion.
We're going to share this mysterious philosophy with you.
Yeah, and when I'm not saying that it's like literally like not real or anything like this. I'm just saying like our perception of the value, like how much value color has when it comes to making an image look like an image, specifically painting. It's really mostly the values, and this is even true with like graphic design. Like we were talking about this a little bit yesterday about how a lot of the graphic designs, like Instagram used to be like an actual picture of like a 3D design of
a camera.
A camera. It's not a camera anymore, right? Like it's like this iconic image of a camera, and that's because it's now the values are just this black and white. It's just a very simple iconic image. So, and they just put like this kind of like rainbowish gradation on it, right? And that's its icon now, and the color is not necessarily indicative of the design anymore. It's the shape of like the icon, and once you start to realize this, you'll start to put it in your work more and more often, and you'll start to focus less on like getting the color right. You'll focus on getting the value right, and then picking a color. And again, there's more to this than I have time to really talk about, but I'm sure, as you guys already seen, like this came together pretty quickly. It's pretty cool. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the color. So everything right here is like on this like kind of yellow hue or whatever, and there's like some sort of bluish, maroon, brown background, right? And we can like add some more saturation to this guy's head, right? Just to kind of add a little bit more of that vibrance. This is like alien looking dude. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a color layer, right? So, and make it black and white. And then I'm going to make an overlay layer, which I have as a hotkey. And then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to make some adjustments to the values using overlay. So basically make this pop a little bit more from the background, because when we're just looking at it as black and white, it's really hard to kind of see it pop out. And I remember yesterday we were talking about this with other people's work. Now you can imagine if I'm just painting this black and white, I would have never made this mistake on accident. I would have been very proactively avoiding this. But because I wasn't, and I was just painting in color, I might have missed it, which I did, right? But then this gives me an opportunity to make other things darker, like maybe I can make the bottom part here darker, right? And I'm only using the overlay layer to do this. And I'm doing it on a layer so that way I can kind of adjust it. Maybe I don't want it to be that intense of a change, right? So I can kind of go back and forth. And so somewhere in the middle, like 60, 50%, right? So this is like the before and after. So now it like really pops out from the background. So if you grab the original layer, so I have it right here, and just so we can see it a little bit larger, I have it right here. I'm going to turn this into a color layer. Nothing's going to happen just yet. So this will be the original original 1, and then this will just be the original 0. Whoops. Or just original. I don't need a... So that's like the original painting. Just so I have like a backup and a backup on top of the backup. And so then I have this, and this is our color layer. And just to make it even more clear, this is the layer that has no... it's basically going to act as a layer that's only going to add color to every layer underneath it. And so the original is pretty much unchanged from the color layer. And if I put this on top, you'll notice that now the colors... Nothing has really changed, but it pops more. Watch. Yeah. And you'll see if I go here, right?
Wow, yeah.
But here's the crazy thing now. So this is a color layer, right? So if I move this, you'll see that it's just only affecting the color, right? As I said, I can change the color. So I go to hue and saturation, and I'm like, you know what? I wonder if it looks better if it's purple instead of yellow. Or maybe like, hot pink is pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Like, then this starts to reveal to you, oh, you know what? I think I understand what he means now.
It works in all these different colors because the values.
Yeah, and then sometimes I'll do this. Like sometimes I'll design something with like yellows, and I'm not because I'm like, oh, this is going to be yellow, just because I want to like have color, and I just want to push the vibrance, and then I will correct it the way I just corrected it there, and then I'll change the colors just to see, is there a better alternative than yellow? And I'm like, you know what? I kind of like this blue instead.
Yeah.
And then I'll just like, I'll literally just merge all this together because I still have the original. And then I'll just work from this now.
So cool.
And now this is my new painting. Yeah. And you would have never guessed that it originally was this like, hot yellow, right? And I can still do that again. I can go back, I'll make adjustments, maybe I'll add more like features to this design, whatever. I'll like extend parts of this to make this look a little bit more different. Right now, like I want to have a little bit more control, to say, and I want to use my round brush to bring it back, because the round brush again does not discriminate. Yes, it's going to give me a lot more control over my painting, especially when I'm starting to deal with a little bit more variables like color. I kind of like to stay not use too many brushes that have like a lot of like opinions about how something should be done. I like to use brushes that are like, no, whatever you want, man. Like,
So
just
funny.
put it in there.
Yeah, the brushes have a personality. Totally.
Yeah, if you think of it that way, it makes sense, because it's like I'm sure you know people that they have a certain personality trait that you navigate, like whether they're very like agreeable people, so you can know that like, oh, they're very like, maybe they're too agreeable, so you need to kind of help push them a little bit, right? So that's how you would engage with them. And there's people that are very disagreeable, which you gotta fight them a lot on all like different topics and stuff like that. And there's people that are in between. There's people that are anxious that you know like. So if you think about like people and how you interact with people, you do it differently. Like the way I talk to my parents is different than the way I talk to my children, you know, versus like friends versus like my spouse, you know. Like there's a difference. I treat my brushes in that same kind of way. I think of it in that same regard. Because if you treat like a brush that's very non-agreeable, like that one I showed you earlier, that's like, I don't care what your opinion is, like this is what's going down.
This is what we're doing.
And if you just know that's what's happening, you're not going to be surprised, right? But if you are expecting it to like listen to you and it's just not listening to you, it can be really aggravating as you're trying to make a really cool painting, you know? Or making a really cool design. And I feel the same way with tools too. I think when people expect a tool to work a certain way, and they get disappointed that it doesn't, I'm kind of like, well, you should have just thought about it, like that this is designed by a group of people and they have a different philosophy than the other group of people that you're, comparing them to. And like, for instance, I had a friend who told me too, he's like I asked him about like software. He's a 3D person, and in 3D you tend to use like 17 different softwares to just make one image. And as a painter, like I'm not used to that, right? I'm used to just like only using one, maybe two software, right? And I was trying to find if there was like a way around it, or if he had like what was the best tool ever. And he was like, look, man, if it takes you 5 hours to do one image in one software versus takes you 1 hour to do one image using 5 softwares, what would you rather do, right? And he says, if you're okay with not leaving the software, but it takes you 4 extra hours to do the image, then so be it. Then that's what you want to do. But if you're about like you want to get something done, and it just happens to you have to go through 5 different tools to make that one image, but you shave 4 hours off your time, then that's what you want to do. And he says, I do the latter. I do the one that takes an hour. So like maybe I'll model in this tool, I'll texture in this tool, I'll render in this tool, and then I'll animate in this tool. And he's like, that's 4 different tools.
Yeah.
Where you can get this one tool that can do all of those things, but 4 of those things are not good. Like you're really fighting the tool to make it work. And I was like, wow, that's a really fascinating philosophy. And I follow that same kind of principle when it comes to painting too. Like I'm like, okay, do I have to just use one brush like the whole time? You know what I mean? So well, one brush could help me construct the image better. One brush can wrangle it in. One brush can help me be creative, right? And I think a lot of times people just use only one brush and like one brush size,
for everything.
And it's like, and they're really fighting against the current sometimes,
I see.
Like if I'm drawing a hard surface design, like a robot, I like to just almost always and exclusively use the round brush because it's kind of industrial feeling out of the box, Right, bam, like that looks like a hard surface, like plastic material,
Yep.
Like immediately. Like it'll just be a little bit harder to do that same thing using like this brush that has like a lot of personality to it, But I'm drawing like some sort of like hybrid alien creature. This might be the best brush to do that for, And so you just got to like pick a lane, and decide what you prefer. and what you're trying to aim for in terms of stylistic integrity, you know, with your design. So.
And it's different for each one you're doing.
Yeah. But hopefully this answers your color question too. I know that originally this is all about one question about color. Yeah. But you can see now, like, I'm painting this and this is my intention, but I can go again and just be like, you know what? What if I change the color one more time? You know, now it's this.
Whoa.
So this is my new color setup that I'm dealing with. And then again, it doesn't mean that I'm like tied down to this saturation too. I'm still in the world of creation. So I can go here and be like, you know what if I just like get this like real hot red and use the overlay layer or overlay mode and just kind of really pop this out more. Because now the brush is on overlay mode, so it's allowing me to create this kind of crazy saturation.
We got 3 minutes until we're going to take a look at our challenge submissions. We're going to give some feedback soon, so if you're almost done, make sure to submit that soon so that we can, in the next 3 minutes, so that we can take a look at it and give you some feedback.
Right on. Yeah, see, I like what's going on here with the overlay.
Yeah,
like I'm,
the purple coming out. That's cool.
It is cool. You know, and your guys' monitor is calibrated pretty close to my screen, too. I just noticed that. It's not too different. I think that's the same one that I have. So that's probably why I feel like right at home. Sometimes your monitors will have like different
colors.
Yeah, and that can be really aggravating. But that's why if you rely again on shapes and values, it becomes even less traumatic, you know, because values are like they don't necessarily matter with the screen colors, you know, because your values are pretty consistent. Then your image is going to look good on multiple devices. So I like that too. So I think my work usually does really well online for that reason alone, for like that consistency of quality. Where I know like some people would be like a Mac like monitor to be able to like feel
that level of accuracy or
yeah.
whatever.
And I don't think you need to be that accurate. I think people forget that not everybody has like an expensive like $3,000 or $4,000 setup. You know, they just have their phone.
Yeah.
And they're just looking at a small screen sometimes. And so having like a really solid black and white image is sometimes more valuable in my opinion. But again, like I could take this, put this on color mode. Oh, was this other one on color mode? Oh, fascinating. Let me do this. I didn't realize that was on color mode. Okay, cool. And so like you can, again, keep going. Put this on color mode, right? Change the colors yet again, and we're back up yellow. But it's like, it's evolved.
Oh, it's evolved so much.
Oh, look at that one.
Wow.
That one's cool. It's like an evolved
So
version
cool.
of the original color setup that we had. Oh, this is on color. Hold on, let me do this. Sorry. Gotta flatten it first. Then I can do this.
Wow. Yeah, I like all that other color that you've added kind of in the neck and chest area. That
Absolutely.
purple.
And then again, if we go back and look at it just as a black and white image, it works still.
Totally.
Right? And that's
a cool trick.
Yeah, and that's by far what I want you guys to take away from this is just the way your values are working mostly. Because even then, like what's cool is like I could take this image and then I'll put this on color mode and there's my other image underneath, remember? And now I can like have color on this image all of a sudden. And then what I can do with this is maybe like adjust the values so I can get more of those colors to really seep through a little bit better. And then go back to this layer and just like use it as a basis to start coloring this dude. You know, so I'm not starting from complete scratch.
Yeah, if you like those colors, you can kind of carry it over here and it can work.
Yeah, and again, you don't have to like them. You can just change them again.
Yeah.
You know, and be
True.
like, all right, this is cool.
All right, it's time for our feedback for our creative challenge, everyone. So today's Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge is to create a one-of-a-kind graphic print using gradients and filters. So let's see what you all came up with. One-of-a-kind print using graphics and filters. Okay, let's take a look at this one. Day 6 version V2. Cool. Oh, I love the shirt. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. So my thoughts is that there's too many tangents. Okay? And a tangent is this thing that happens where you have two shapes that are touching each other, and they'll create a false sense of like it just has this sense of indecision. And whenever you're making an image, you got to make things clear. And if you're creating a tangent deliberately, and I'll give you an example of a deliberate tangent, it can actually be really helpful. But if you are not doing it deliberately, it can look like there's some errors in your image. Okay, so in this example, you'll see like the hair is like really close to the mountain part, so it's like really too close, and then the ball itself is also too close. So what it will do is it will stop presenting a sense of depth. Meaning that, is that sphere in the distance or close to us? We're not sure entirely because it's kind of touching everything. Now, I'm assuming that it's like he might be spinning it on his fingers, but he could also just be pointing at it. I don't know. I'm not sure what the intention is. And that's what tangents can do. They can create confusion, right? So if your intention was like, no, he's pointing at like a circle, then we might need to have an overlap. So instead of like the circle being touched, like there would be an overlap of his finger over that shape. So we know that it's in front. Does that make sense?
Are tangents like the intersections of lines and shapes?
Yeah, like if I were to make a tangent just on my hands right there in the thumbnail down there. Oh wait, there you go. Right? Like there you go. So is my hand behind or in front, you know? But if I do this, oh, it's behind. If I do this, oh, it's in front. But if I'm like just kind of like that, like you don't know. And right now it's actually behind, but you can kind of tell. Oh shoot, it's really hard to it's really hard to create this optical illusion. But it is behind. But it looks like it could be in front, right? But trust me, it's behind, you know? And so that's what's happening in this image. And also it's a little off center. And I like to think of whenever you make things a little off center, you got to go all in, and you got to make a very clear statement. I think this image would be better if the sphere was in the center because it's so prominent of a shape that it makes sense that it would be in the center. And if it's supposed to be in a distance, he's pointing at it, then it will be better. And the example of a tangent that works is in a movie called Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So in the movie, there's a moment in the very intro where it's like an animated film, and it shows the baby in the crib, and it's like a very static, like 2D Mario level type of layout. It's like very straight on. And then the baby escapes, and then it does like this forced perspective, and then the crib itself like creates a tangent on the frame, right? And it's supposed to imply like chaos or stuff like, because like I said, it's when you have a tangent, you're not necessarily sure if something's in front or ahead, whatever. So when they put that tangent in that frame, it was kind of like, it was supposed to say, not only are we now in like a dynamic 3-point perspective, something is not right.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? And you get that instant feeling, and that whole sequence right after that, it's just nothing but stuff like that. And that's a really clear like design choice to make you feel uneasy. I don't think that's your intention with this image, right? Like if you're trying to make people feel uneasy, like The Shining uses a lot of tangents, like that movie The Shining by Kubrick. And so it makes you feel uneasy. Horror movies will do this too, you know? Like make you not sure what's in the shadows, right? Like there's like, is that an eye? Is that like a face? They do these kind of deliberate lack of clarity to make you feel really weird. Where if you're just trying to make a cool image, and you're not trying to make anybody feel weird, you want to make people to be in awe, then I think the tangents are not helping that.
Okay.
So
That's great feedback. Let's take a look at Another person's tan. Okay, cool. So here's the starter files, and then we have this one.
Oh, shoot. I almost dropped my glasses. I'm going to move these out of the way.
I think that this kind of circular orb has a pretty cool effect, but I think it's competing with the person's body. And
Yes.
I don't really know which one to focus on or look at. I want something to stand out more. And then with the background, it also kind of has the same values, like with what we were talking about,
Yeah.
where it's all blending together a bit. I want some separation in this image.
Yeah, can we take a look at all the stuff too? I think last time we only like looked at or all these different artists. They're using the same image. Is that what it is?
I think so, yes.
Oh, okay. So never mind. Let's
Yes.
look back at that one then. Okay, I see what's going on here. Sorry. Yeah, I see a common theme though from many of the people here and like the work that they submit. It is a lack of focus, and it's a lack of control when it comes to contrast and unity. I talked about this yesterday. I think today I might want to demonstrate a very elaborate like way of thinking about this. Is it all right if I go back to my screen for a
No
second?
problem, yeah.
Yeah, because I think this is like even when we just kind of scrub through and saw some other people's work, and even yesterday, right? Like it just seems kind of a continuous problem that you guys were having. So I think just this miniature lecture could help you guys out to think of it this way. Okay, so you know, as we were just saying, like it's kind of like hard to focus in on the image, and that's because it's not having a good balance between unity and contrast. All right, so you have these two ideas. Like these ideas are supposed to make an image like nice to look at. So let me show you two images that could be made just using simple shapes, right? So I want to show you an image that just has nothing but contrast, right? And right away, it should not feel good to like look at. You would not think that's the greatest piece of artwork, right? And that was intentional. I intentionally made that look bad. Okay. Now let's do a something that is unified. Okay. But everything has some sort of unity to it. All right. Okay, so that also doesn't feel too interesting to look at. So you got something that's completely full of contrast, and you have something that's completely unified, right? And there's a case to both, where you can make something that's really chaotic, but it has some appeal to it, and you can make something that's really uniform and has some appeal to it. There are cases that you can do that, where you can really focus on that. But look what happens when you combine both unity and contrast in a way that's elegant, okay? So the way that I'm going to unify this image is through triangles, okay? Let me paint out that. All right. So I'm going to unify this image using triangles, or like basically angles, right? And then I'm going to add one more triangle. So now when we look at these three images, there's one that's obvious, there's an obvious winner, okay? But if we really break it down, what's really unifying it? Well, there's triangles, right? Like this is an elongated triangle, but there's also contrast. Each triangle is a different shape and size, right? One's a little bit squashed, one's a little bit elongated, and one's pointing upwards. So they're all going in different directions. They're all have a different shape and size. They're all even like, pointing in like, or have some sort of perspective that's different from one another. So that's the contrast. But they're unified through their value even. They're all black, And so when you do this a lot, you can keep adding. So what if I wanted to add more? So I can just add more triangles, right? But I'm going to create contrast. There's not a triangle that's a perfect right angle in this image yet, but now there is.
Yeah.
And now it doesn't necessarily take away from the image, it actually may add to it. And I can add another one down here to cut that one there. Now we kind of have started to have like a landscape going on here, right?
That's so interesting.
What if I made more triangles? right? We're creating a family here. Even the spacing is not the same, right? But they're sharing the same. They're all upwards looking triangles. They look like a family of little triangles, but they're not exactly the same, because if I were to, gotta drop off my kid. If they were all like uniform, it starts to not feel as interesting as when they weren't.
You need some sort of unity, but then there's also contrast that you need within that as well.
That's when we start to have an appealing image. And you can do this for logo designs, obviously. You can do this for character designs, environments, product design, industrial design. These are kind of universally true for a lot of things that look good, right? They just are. And like fashion design and all stuff. And I'm just going to give you kind of quick cliff notes of what tools you can use to do this. And one of them is layer caking, is where you have a small, medium, and large shape. There is rules of 3, where you have a repeating shape at least 3 times. And then you have counterbalance, where you have this idea of like one thing is solid, one thing is not. One thing is solid, and you just kind of pattern it like that. And if you put these 3 ideas together in that way that I just showed, where you have a way you separate the shapes because you're separating them through size. So you have like a big shape there, you got a medium shape there, or a small shape there, and then maybe you got like a medium shape inside, or whatever. Whatever that abstract thing I just created has some appeal already, like out of the box. But this is small, this is large, and this is medium, right? And then I can do counterbalance by filling this shape in. And guess what other shape I would probably fill in? The one over here, right? So that, again, keeps that balance of like unity through like this counterbalance. There's like a pattern that's going on. But also, they're all pretty much the same shape. They're just kind of this shape that has like a wider edge to it, and it like tapers, And so when you start to kind of practice this, and even the shape itself has some like rules of 3 going on it, Like there's like some rules of 3, some counterbalance, even just the lines. So the shape itself has some appeal to it, So the more you do this, the better your images are. So now let's go back and look at like some of the artwork, and using this terminology that we just showed. If we can go back to the Discord.
Yes, let's look at that.
Yeah, okay, so now let's go back to the image again. So now you can see this might have too much contrast, right? You got elements coming, like you have this triangle ray of light coming from the left frame, you have the circle, and then you got a human and you got a mountain. And none of these things are necessarily connected in any real way, other than maybe the colors. But maybe there's just too many shapes. Now, let's imagine if you got, and I bet you if you started doing this, you'll see it right away, how it would improve. What if you got rid of the ray of the triangle ray, but now just kept circles, right? What if her glasses were more round, right? Like they already are, so that kind of already works. What if the mountains and stuff that you have, like what if you try to create a radial design around it, like you put like in a mask underneath it, and then what if you put more circles around? And just different spots and locations, and just change the size and width, so that way it just has more unity, because right now this has too much contrast, and nothing is really entirely focused because of that. Because like what the thing I just showed you does, it allows us to see the image clearly, and that's what makes it have such great appeal. You know what I mean? Like when you look at something and you feel good about looking at that thing, it's because you are clear at what you're looking at. And using the design elements I just showed you creates that clarity. And when you don't do that, again, you might accidentally create something that makes people feel uncomfortable because they don't know what they should be looking at.
I see.
And that's why in horror movies and movies that like really stress you out, they will do that. They will literally like have strobe lights. They'll like go from yellow to right. The camera doesn't stay still, right? Like it's chaotic. But that's deliberate, right? That's trying to demonstrate like something that's really hard to put your finger down. But when you look at like an animated film, like the colors are so vibrant and so clear, so good. So
it makes you feel good watching it.
Yeah, because everything just feels so balanced and aesthetically, so that you like it. Where if you watch like Alien, like the alien himself is like so cluttered with design and patterns. It's a great horror design, you know, because it's terrifying. You don't know what the heck it is at all. There's nothing familiar, you know? And so I think that's a common problem that I see with a lot of these artworks that you guys are submitting. And it's easily fixed if you kind of practice this system of thinking. Yeah, so like this one, for instance, kind of works better because at least we have like the triangles in the background. You see that? Like this person used it twice again. So we almost are having that repetition. And even the checkerboard pattern is being used again. And then these are all being kind of unified through colors. So that's why this one feels more successful than some of the other ones because of that,
Yeah, I
that
agree.
systematic like reuse of the elements. So that's the rules in 3 at play. But what I would say is like you see how like the rays coming out of her face are like the same size as the rays that are like in the background. What if they were smaller? You know, what if they were bigger? Make a choice and just stick with it. You know, in terms of the checker pattern, that's great because the sunglasses are the smaller version of that, and then the cloak is the large shape of that. But again, it's only 2 times we see that pattern. What if the pattern was also in her ear loop? That might look good. Try it out. See if it looks good. You might be like, oh, and so that's the small shape of the checker because we have the small, medium with the sunglasses, and then large with the cloak. And then we have counterbalance because the sunglasses, then the face, then the ear, and then the neck, and then the body. And you'll see like this pattern. And with the ray, you have her head in the way, and then you have the ray there. What if there was one on the bottom, like maybe a pyramid coming from behind the mountains? I'll try that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm not necessarily a graphic designer, so this is the kind of stuff that still would be a little bit out of my wheelhouse. Like, I don't have the tools to create like just a really graphic image that doesn't require like a character involved. Like, my graphic design is all contained inside of a character design. It's not. I don't really consider the background part of the design a lot of times. Where a graphic design, that is the final piece of artwork.
It's everything encompassed in that piece.
Where mine is just what's going to be in a movie, and I need to design it so it looks graphically appealing because I never know if it's going to be lit in a dark environment, a light environment, you know, in a green lighting, a brown lighting, you know, bottom lit, top lit.
Yeah.
But the graphic read should be like iconic, regardless of the circumstances.
That's great. Okay. Next one. Oh. Turtle with a cool background.
Turtle with a cool background. So this one actually works pretty well. I think just the background is probably a little too, like the values are very similar. I think the turtle might need to be darker and the background needs to be a little bit lighter. But I actually kind of think this is cool. I have seen stuff like this be made and like sold like on t-shirts. Like I can totally see this be like a print on a t-shirt. It just got to be like, again, you got to do yourself a favor, everybody. Like zoom like a mile away from your image. Like imagine that you saw your image, whatever it is, like on a wall, like 400, 500 feet away from you, you know? And does it read the way that you want it to? And if it doesn't, then the problem is you're zoomed in too much, too often. You need to zoom out a little bit, guys. But I actually think this one's cool. I like this one. Maybe it's because I like turtles. I have a bias.
Okay, here's Paul Tranny's.
Okay, yeah. So this one, I think does that thing that I was talking about pretty well. But again, it has just like the rainbow ray coming out of the eyes only one time. And so to me, like I would do it again. I would repeat that. And I know you guys were using like a lot of stock images that were provided. And so what you might want to consider is sometimes less is more. You don't have to use like every little piece to make the image. Like I think maybe the tools were given to, or like all those assets were given to you guys, not necessarily for you guys to use every single thing and every single
Every part of it, yeah.
every possible conceivable way. Sometimes it can just be about simplicity. Like sometimes this is all you get from your client, and maybe they don't want you to use everything. They just say this is all the assets we have, and they're relying on your taste and your ability of like creating good designs to work with what they have. For me, whenever I work on a character design, that's kind of what they do. They give me like lots of reference and like ideas, but ultimately they rely on me to kind of like organize their thoughts in a way that has a cohesive, unique design. I don't always just use their ideas, and if I do, I might make a separate image. So, for instance, like let's say you had like 6 elements, maybe I would make 3 images using 2 elements for each image.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, instead of, it's like the less is more approach sometimes
Yeah.
works better.
But I would essentially use everything that was given to me, but just in the context of this is now an image that uses these 2 elements.
Instead of all of them in
All
one.
of them in one, yeah. But I like that one too, actually. I think that one turned out good.
Oh, I think this is the text one from the other day, so we can take a look at this as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I can see that there's like some sort of like environment in the text, but it looks like blood. I thought it was...
I could see cacti.
Yeah, so this goes back to like clarity, because that's the Day of the Dead, right? That's what that says. And so, and I know the Day of the Dead is more of a celebration, so I'm not sure. And you can make the argument that blood is involved, but that's my point. Like, was it supposed to be intentionally like a bloody feeling text? Because if I just looked at it without knowing, without like scrutinizing it, because I'm obviously reviewing this, so I'm trying to like pay attention to what's actually going on. If I'm just like passing by and I'm just looking at this, I might not even thought of that. I might not even look at this as some sort of like Latin holiday. I would just be like, oh, this is like some sort of like monster or some sort of like creature that has like a flower bouquet on their head for whatever reason in a jungle. Now this might not send the appropriate signal, is what I'm getting at, right? For someone who knows nothing about that holiday. I happen to know about it, so I'm kind of like, I can see how this could be a misdirect, because you have like the skull and it's like a real skull, and then the lettering looks like it's bleeding.
Yeah.
And that could be the way you want to go with it. You might want to say, no, I want to like really focus on the death part, the dead part. Then go all in. Like make it no doubt that this is like supposed to be more driven by like the death aspect of it and what death brings. But
the top of it is quite bright, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's just like it's not consistent, the theme, Like there's a reason why when you look at like the skull of the skull makeup that people put, it's really beautiful and it doesn't instill fear. That's like the movie Coco. When you watch Coco, you're not like, oh my god, this is a horror movie. It's about like the Day of the Dead and all these people that are dead. It's the celebration of those who you lost and remembering them. The whole theme of Coco was about remembering people. Like the song is like "Remember Me." Like it's like really on the nose. There is no. It's not subtle. It's like, no, this is all about remembering. If I don't remember my great-great-grandfather, he's going to be gone forever.
Yeah, rather than killing or anything.
Yeah, and then like the main like antagonist used his very popular song was called "Remember Me," but it wasn't for the general audience. It was for his daughter. So it was like that. There's nothing about that whole movie that was like frightening, and that image can send mixed signals. So you should reconsider some of the elements you put in there.
We got about a minute and a half left, so
Okay.
let's do this one really quickly.
Okay, great. So this is a great example of there's too many elements, right? So I think like if I blur my eyes and just look at it graphically, there's some stuff that work really well. But again, it's just like you got the swirl pattern in the background. You got the mountains that are black and white. You have her in color. And then she's got like this kind of like default like wallpaper texture on her. So it's kind of like nothing is connecting with one another, but everything on their own is kind of okay. Like if I just saw like that swirly pattern texture, I've seen that kind of design and that swirl. There's some aesthetic to that and the gradation on it. The mountain, I think, is one of the stock images, and the person is obviously stock image. So those already have some appeal to them, just naturally. So like, it would have been cooler if you found a way to introduce the swirl back into her outfit, and maybe like someone else did with the sunglasses, use the sunglasses as a way to kind of get a graphic read and design in there. Like I would essentially just eliminate the texture that you have back there. It just doesn't seem appropriate. It doesn't make any sense. Like you just put it on there. And I know what this is like because I've done this in the past on my own artwork. I was just like, oh, you got to put texture on there.
Yeah.
Because you just feel it adds more value because it's a little bit more. But like, again, it's like, unless there's a reason, you should be very hesitant to put just stuff in there just for the sake of doing it.
Okay. Well, I think that's all we have time for, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Anthony, for being with us and teaching some awesome stuff. We'll see you next time, everyone. Have an awesome rest of your day.
All right. See you guys.